Hello everyone and welcome to another News Coolum video. So I'm about to go check out a new charging site for a brand new charging provider. So I'm going to go check out their grand opening. I really like their business model and I'm really hoping them well. So I want to go check it out. Now I just did about a 500-mile round trip down to Salinas, California to check out Trajectory EV. That video already went live. For that entire 500 trip, I pretty much only used EVgo. I did stop at an Electrify America. I didn't really need to charge, but I wanted to check out the site because there were reports of outages, and there are 2 chargers down, and then the other 2 are working at reduced power. But I feel like with a lot of my trips at this point, I want to start purposely avoiding Electrify America. I don't have anything against them, but I feel like the entire community right now is hyper-focused on them. And so I was going to do sort of a big loop again for this trip and just avoid all of the big players, Electrify America, ChargePoint, EVgo, and then just focus on the smaller networks that are trying to get traction and trying to improve. But I just don't think that's going to be logistically possible today. Not that I couldn't do it, it's just with the time constraints. I'm getting out a little bit later than I wanted to. Right now they're saying I would arrive basically at the time that grand opening session is supposed to happen. And that's with traffic at 7:25 in the morning. I think I'm actually going to take a back route though. This cuts about 10 miles off the overall trip time. It reduces the average driving speed, but by shortening the trip, that can help. And then, of course, it also pretty much should reduce any need to actually charge on the way. I might be able to make it all the way into San Francisco without even topping up for 5 to 10 minutes in my Bolt EV. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. Yeah, let's get ready to head out. I'm here in South San Francisco at a new ChargeNet. In fact, the first ChargeNet charging site that just went live. It's at a Taco Bell. This is a brand new charging site provider. Yeah, let's just go ahead and take a tour of the ChargeNet site. This is the first time I've used one of these newer tritium chargers, and it's not compatible with the early Bolt EV, it looks like. So whether this is something that GM needs to get on and work with tritium on, this is the first company, ChargeNet is the first company I know of in North America who is using these chargers. I don't know that anybody else would really be able to identify this error. Now that some of these other cars have cleared out, I might want to just do a little bit more B-roll, but I'm going to get on the road pretty soon anyway. It was 3.5 hours getting here. So hopefully I can get maybe a little bit of a faster trip home after I check out a couple of more chargers on the way. Here in South San Francisco, I was planning on coming here anyway. Now, EV Range is a company that I've been wanting to, check out one of their sites for. I've been wanting to see what they're up to. They've placed a pretty big emphasis on high-powered charging. But if you look at where EV Range is placing a lot of their charging sites, they are in areas that facilitate travel. All right, well, so checked out this EV Range charging network, and yeah, I think we're going to hit the road, and this isn't going to be a super long trip. I think all told, maybe only about 350 miles all the way around, but it'll be nice in the sense that I made this trip without maybe visiting any of the major charging providers. So I am going to probably have to charge up at least one more time to make it home. We're at a little over 60% right now. I'm just going to go ahead and close out of this EV Range session and hit the road. And it looks like we'll be able to try another non-major charging company in about 80 miles north, so we should arrive with a decent amount of charge. Maybe I'll do a little bit of shopping or stop for lunch on the way, but yeah, it'll be nice to be able to, like I said, do about a 300 mile round trip, a little bit more than that, without ever using any of the major charging providers. So just kind of giving an idea of what's currently available. So yeah, let's get ready to head out. Okay, well, here we are at our next and probably final charging stop, not using Electrify America or ChargePoint or EVgo. This is a Shell Greenlots station at Max Machinery in Heidelberg, and yeah, it's a Shell recharge station. It's I'm not going to do a full site review on it, but I might do a quick walk around. We've been super efficient so far this trip. In fact, if I had my original tires and my original battery, from when I first bought it, I could have driven this entire trip so far just on the original charge, right? I would have only needed to stop to charge now. So yeah, less than 59 kilowatt hours to get us to this point, which is 254.4 miles in. And I mean, and actually that is pretty much in line with expected efficiency in the Bolt EV with mixed driving. So not really a surprise there. It's just I haven't seen that much energy in my pack for probably 3 years now. And like I said, these new tires are a little bit less efficient. But I already finished my lunch. Luckily, these chargers aren't the fastest. Now, Shell states that they're up to 200 kilowatt. I'm not exactly sure how you would get there, though, because based on what I'm seeing right now, they might only be outputting 125 kilowatt. Not the fastest chargers. But, I mean, it is an interesting in that it's not at a gas station, right? And this is what we've seen from Shell Recharge in that, they tend to not put their chargers in at gas stations. Whether they don't want to take up the space at the gas station itself or compete, I don't know what the reasoning is, but I've seen probably a majority of the Shell Recharge stations I've seen have not been at gas stations. Some of them have, but this one is not. This one is at, like I said, a machinery shop. The other thing is Shell Recharge seems to be charger agnostic, right? So I've seen multiple different hardware types. Now, I don't know that I've used any of their ABB chargers, but I have seen ABB chargers at their locations. These are BTC power units, so actually, other than a module configuration, they're really not any different than the EV range chargers that we used previously. And then I've also seen the Tritium V-Fill, I think the RT50. So they have a wide range of chargers that they use. Now, this particular site also has grid type battery backup. Now, I've seen some posts on PlugShare sort of questioning whether this battery is only capable of outputting a certain amount of power. I don't think that's it at all. In fact, I think I think that the charger itself is what's probably not seeing peak power. Yeah, I think they still need to do a lot of work with their app, because their app is a bit obtrusive in terms of what it's asking from you and how it asks you to interact. And then, of course, there's a big trend using the QR codes on the stations as a means to activate. And I really, that's probably one of my least favorite methods for activating a charge. Now, one thing to note too is, even though there aren't a whole lot of amenities that you would expect for a stop on site, there is a market on the other side of the street. So you basically do have a convenience store here. This is the grid tie energy storage. So it's 192 kilowatt hours, EVE SCO. So this is interesting. I don't know if this is supposed to designate how much charge is in the battery, but if it does or is, then it's not really lit up in any way. But I mean, this is a pretty sizable battery, and I think it really makes sense for these DC fast charging sites to be using these types of grid tied batteries. The LFP is going to be a lot more cost effective than using something like the Tesla power packs or any of the nickel based batteries, which quite honestly I think are kind of a waste for anything that's not mobile. I mean, you don't need this to necessarily be light, and in fact I'm not entirely opposed to making these sorts of stations out of lead acid. So I think the big factor is that you want to have enough to do peak shaving, and lead acid, if they're kept topped up and in a conditioned environment, can last a very long time. It's just they don't have anywhere near the amount of energy or energy storage capabilities. And then here you can see, so this is really sort of a limited power output battery. But again, if you're really only looking to offset peak demand charges, it doesn't need to have a massive amount of power output or a large inverter. And also notice there's a reasonably large solar panel array here, probably at least 100 kilowatt that I would guess, and there are other level 2 chargers on here. So it's not like you would get stranded if you couldn't get this Shell recharge station working. It looks like there's plenty of other options to charge here if you absolutely needed to. I'm not sure what the protocol is for those other Clipper Creeks, because they do not look networked in any way. But yeah, so like this is so they have a lot of signage that they're definitely trying to advertise here, and as a fueling company I think that's going to be necessary for Shell, but yeah, I can guarantee you these chargers are not currently outputting 200 kilowatt. If the Bolt EV maxes them out at around 125 amp output, then yeah, and see this is 350 amp max output. So these are maybe the same exact units that EV Range was using, that they were listing them as technically 350 kilowatt units, but good luck ever, I think, seeing that much power. In fact, these Huber Plus Sooner cables really might be overkill for this charging station, because These are typically 500 amp cables, and it doesn't look like these redox cables would ever be taxed. I would almost rather see like a lighter, simpler, standard 200 amp cable and just call it a day. If you have an EV that can charge it over 400 volts, then great for them. It's like it is like a true 120 to 150 kilowatt charger. But if you're just pulling 200 amps at 400 volts, well then 75, 80 kilowatts is all you can expect. So I mean, I think overall it's a good site, right? It's helpful, it's useful. It's right off of Highway 101 and heading up into the Mendocino forest, and then of course up to the redwoods. But also I think any charging providers who are installing in angled parking really need to make sure that you're angling the chargers as well. It seems like such a basic concept, but it's really important, because if your chargers aren't angled with the parking spaces, you're going to run into some serious issues in terms of reaching the car with the cables, especially something like this where it's fixed and there's no adjustment arm or anything to let these chargers reach the cars. So yeah, I mean, overall it's okay. I think the main reason I wanted to check this charger out, though, had nothing to do with Shell, had everything to do with this EVgo, Electric Vehicle Energy Storage Company. I'm going to have to look a little bit more into them, but this seems like a great idea, right? 192 kilowatt hours, enough to offset 50 kilowatt of peak draw from the grid, and it's just put it on a platform, just a nice little foundation here. I don't know how many tons this weighs. I'm guessing several. So, but yeah. But overall, it's a nice site, and I'm probably just going to start getting wrapped up and getting ready to head back over the mountains, because I'm burning daylight, literally here. Oh, nice. Alright, so I normally don't come back with this much daylight, so I figured I would actually take a more scenic route, one that I haven't driven in a very long time. It's just an old dirt road, Walker Ridge off of Highway 20. So I figure I'll just head up into the hills, and I'll make it home eventually. I am still at about 35-ish battery. Yeah, about 35-ish% maybe, something like that. Which, I don't know, should be plenty. Actually, Google Maps even sort of recalibrated, I think. No, maybe not. I don't think they know what's going on. I think they want me to turn around somewhere. Oh well, let's just assume that Google Maps doesn't know what the heck they're talking about. So, alright. Well, the adventure continues. Just over 361, about 362 miles total, so not a long road trip by my standards, and 87.5 kilowatt hours used. So fairly efficient as well. And, I just kind of wanted to call this out because I decided to take, just a detour through the forest and just a back gravel rough road. And even though, there's 30 miles left on my trip, I use less than 10% battery to do that. So, if you want to do the math on that, that's a pretty significant range that you can expect when driving through like a national forest or whatever. And I think that's a point I hear a lot of people make about not wanting EVs because they go camping a lot or they go into the woods a lot. But my experience has been you get a surprisingly large amount of range and really good efficiency when you're driving slowly on back dirt and gravel roads, right? You can actually see a pretty significant range. And so when people say, oh, a 300-mile EV truck isn't going to be good enough for me because I go camping or I go out in the wilderness, you might be getting closer to 500 to 600 miles on a battery charge when you do that, right? That's something that you have to be aware of, is that at their most efficient, electric vehicles they embarrass internal combustion engine vehicles. It's not particularly close, and it's all because of the reduced parasitic losses. And when overcoming aerodynamic drag is no longer a factor, that superior efficiency in the powertrain really becomes prominent, and that's when you see, it's an equivalent of hypermiling. That's when you see these cars that are only rated for 200-300 miles of range going 500, 600, 700, 800 miles on a charge. So I just thought that was kind of interesting, kind of fun. It was just a great drive anyway. Got to see the sunset from the mountaintop, got to look down at one of our reservoirs. So, just overall, it was just a nice little detour. And, it did feel like driving over regolith, right? Like I'm in a lunar lander. Thank you, GM. But yeah, it's something that I rarely get to do because, I'm driving so much farther than just 360 miles in a trip. But the other thing is, sort of mission accomplished. This was kind of what I wanted to do. There was one other charging network that I didn't get to test out that I wanted to showcase, but there just wouldn't have been enough time, and it would have been, too far out of the way and too much additional driving. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the ChargeNet charger working, so technically I didn't charge there, even though it did ramp up and then shut down. So hopefully they can troubleshoot what's going on with these tritium chargers, these newer tritium chargers, because it seems like it's specifically a problem with the Chevrolet Bolt EV, but that means it very likely could be a problem with some other first-generation CCS EVs. I'm thinking of things like the Chevrolet Spark EV. It could be an issue with the BMW i3. Could be an issue possibly even with the Hyundai Ioniq, or the Kona Electric, or the Kia Niro EV. Those cars could also potentially be affected. Some of those earlier sub 200 amp CCS EVs. So hopefully ChargeNet and Tritium can get to the bottom of it and do a little bit more troubleshooting and figure out. Apparently a newer Bolt EV didn't have that same issue. So, but yeah, so I was able to visit there, kind of showcase ChargeNet as a new charging player. EV range, like I said, they have a lot of chops, and they have a surprising amount of industry experience for a relatively unknown charging provider. And I really like some of the locations where they're going in, because they really are targeting those areas that are going to help EV owners get places where they couldn't get before. So just based on what I'm seeing from them, if they can get the funding, I could totally see them doing something like putting chargers on the remote California Highway 395 north of Reno, where literally nobody else has decided to put chargers except for maybe Tesla. And those aren't open to the public yet, or who knows when. And then also Shell green lots, right? So it was Shell, but like I said, they took over green lots billing, which is maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing. It just gives them a direct path into the market. And like I said, one of the funny things about the Shell Recharge network is they're not necessarily building at Shell gas stations. So you could see them at food courts, you could see them, retail centers, things like that. And that's an interesting shift, right? So they're moving away from the convenience store model of a Shell gas station and saying, hey, look, we're going to put chargers at a coffee shop. And, maybe it makes more sense that way. So overall, Shell Recharge, I know people say, look, I don't want to support a fossil fuel company, but we have to be realistic about this too. Who right now has the capital to make a transition to electric vehicles possible? It really is some of these fossil fuel companies, and I am never going to chastise someone for doing the right thing. So even if they're also doing the wrong thing, I think it's wrong to not acknowledge when they're doing the right thing. Otherwise, how do you reward the behavior that you want to see them doing? So, I would never be a Shell customer if all they did was sell gas, right? That's not something that I would do. So, but the fact that they're selling electricity means that I'm going to welcome their contributions to the charging infrastructure, even though I'm not necessarily happy about other aspects of their business. So I think that's important to do as well. But again, so like I said, not as long of a trip. If it were closer to a 500-mile trip, maybe I would have used that other network, the EV network. But for now, and then of course I got to check out a couple of different grid type battery options, the Delta battery option, the EVE SCO, the one that Shell was using at that recharge. So I think these other grid type batteries for public DC fast chargers are also a crucial element as well. And I think pretty much, in my opinion, any DC fast charging site that's faster than 50 to 100 kilowatt total for the site really needs to have some sort of grid type battery attached to it. Otherwise, I just don't see how it would make financial sense to do, right? You would need a huge amount of throughput. And once that happens, you could be profitable without a grid type battery, but you still might rather have one anyway, just because it also helps stabilize the grid. So it's not just about what you gain from it, it's about what you can put back into the system. So anyway, like I said, this isn't, maybe this video is going to go a little bit longer, even though, like I said, it was a relatively short trip. Maybe as much as 8 hours of driving, right? I don't know what my average driving time was, but between traffic, taking some of the slower roads, things like that. And that's pretty much what you can expect on a more relaxed trip, is about 8 hours to maybe 10 hours of driving in a Bolt EV and maybe an hour of charging. So maybe a little bit longer than an hour of charging. I arrived with still almost a quarter of a battery left, so clearly I spent way longer than I needed to charging, but that's because I was checking out the sites, not so much needing to charge. So anyway, I'd love to hear what you think. What did you think about the trip? What do you think about these 3 new charging providers, ChargeNet, EV Range, and, relatively new, right? Shell Green Lots, Shell Recharge, using the old Green Lots Shell. Shell games? Anyway, I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments. Have you seen some of these networks popping up in your area? Would you like to see some of them pop up in your area as maybe an alternative to what I'd call the big 3 right now? Maybe there's a big 4, right, with Blink, ChargePoint, Electrify America, and EVgo. But this is what I mean when I say that the public charging infrastructure is really diversifying. It's really growing in ways that aren't really being talked about. So I'd love to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and thank you for watching.